Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, and it's my pleasure to have Mary Resenbeck with us. Mary is an experienced Montessori classroom teacher, theater instructor, educational manager, and a veteran homeschooling mom of three beautiful children. She's recently authored a book, Take Charge of Your Child's Education, discussing how parents can take an individualized and personalized maverick approach to homeschool their children successfully. Mary, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm excited to talk about homeschooling and children's education. I have a 3-year-old, it just turned 3 last month, and so this is very pertinent for me, and I'm sure for a number of listeners who have young children or school-age children. So if you could maybe encapsulate the benefits of homeschooling, or at least incorporating some homeschool curriculum, even if they do go to a regular school, what would those be?
My basis is enrichment, and I do what's called academic based musicals. And so I really enjoy doing that as a teacher, but also as a homeschool mom. And I recommend it on all levels of learning. So if you want to homeschool, you can find an enrichment center to fill in the blanks that maybe you can't teach at home. There are professional teachers at enrichment centers, and you can really do it in an a la carte way where you can take those classes that you're really looking for and pick and choose and individualize and personalize your child's education. Or if you have a child that is maybe in a private school or a different type of school like a Waldorf or a Montessori, but yet you're still looking for those enrichment courses, there's all kinds of after school enrichment centers as well that can benefit with your curriculum and what you're looking for your child's schedule.
Yeah. So why did you choose homeschooling instead of sending your kids to a Montessori school or Waldorf school or some sort of magnet school?
Well, it all began through Montessori. My children have invisible learning differences. They are gifted intellectually, so they are called, now they have a term for it, twice exceptional. So they were gifted, but yet they were severely dyslexic and they had dysgraphia and certain things in a traditional setting that wasn't working in a traditional classroom. So I kind of had an unconventional way of getting into teaching. I went and actually applied as the theater teacher because I had many years of theater experience, and then ended up being also a teacher's aide, which rolled into being a Montessori full-time teacher for 6 to 9 year olds. So basically, I followed my children to school. And everything went really well. It was a performing arts based school, too, and both my children are gifted in those areas. So everything was going very well until they hit middle school and high school. And that's when really their IEPs, which is called an individualized education program that children will get on different spectrums of learning when they might be having difficulties in different areas. And because they were twice exceptional, a lot of times the teachers thought they were faking it or they weren't trying hard enough. And so they were not adhering to the accommodations and modifications in the classroom. That is actually legally required. That's frustrating alone, but with it affecting their academics, it also affected their peer group. They started losing friends because when your teachers are saying certain things in the classroom, it's just natural that your friend group is going to, adhere to what the teacher is saying. So their depression rates rose, and I had to act fast. And so I decided to kind of launch in to homeschooling. I was also just newly pregnant with my third child. Felt that it was a great way to kind of enter that world, and I found a great camaraderie, a community, and it was a wonderful avenue to really highlight my children's passions, their gifts, their talents, and really focus on life skills and get them to where they need to be as, really productive adults. And they did it, and they experienced all the same things that traditional learners do. They had a prom, they went to, Disneyland, they had grad night, they had a full graduation. So you can homeschool and have all those bells and whistles. And so when I realized you can personalize and individualize a child's education, I just launched into it with both feet.
It sounds like a ton of work, though. Did you have to quit your job, or is this a full-time thing and you have to kind of give up on your career or your business in order to pull this off?
Well, luckily, it really slipped into parents reaching out to me and asking how I could do that for their child. And they told me, "Look, I'm working. I can't, I can't do this." So it actually kind of fell in my lap, being a educational manager, and so that's how I really was able to still work, but also be able to provide a complete homeschooling environment for children. And that's how I did it. But no, you don't have to quit your job. You do not have to stop all your career because, a lot of times parents are intimidated about teaching certain subjects anyway. And they have to make money to feed and pay the bills for their family. So that's where I guide them. I guide them and let them know that, look, you have enrichment centers where they have drop-off programs where they mimic a traditional brick and mortar, but you are able to make sure that those classes are adhering to what your expectation is for your child. And there's tutors, there's online courses. It depends on what your child, your age of your child. Also depends on what you're looking for your child and the direction you're looking for them to go.
Are you familiar with Acton Academy? I recently heard about them, that they're really good.
I've actually looked into Acton Academy myself, but that is actually a school where you're going to build it together as the community. So it actually acts a lot like an enrichment center, but it's a school. It's like a private school, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Now, you mentioned dyslexia and dysgraphia. What is dysgraphia? I know dyslexia is where it kind of scrambles the way that you see words, and it's almost like seeing them backwards or something like that.
Well, that's actually a misconception.
Okay.
It's a spectrum with dyslexia. Yeah, sometimes you can read actually okay. It's a comprehension issue where you're reading it, but you are not, comprehending what it's saying. So you might have to hear it auditory. So somebody might have to read it to you for you to retain the information. And yes, there are levels of you see reversals, but that's actually just a very small percentage of what dyslexia is, and it's a big monster. Dysgraphia is actually, it affects fine motor skills, and so it affects your ability to grasp the pencil correctly. So an example, my son would be able to lecture, tell stories, and carry on, and teachers would be impressed with him, and then they would have him sit down and maybe write a passage from the board, and he physically couldn't do it, and they just said, "You're lazy, you're not doing it." And then he finally was able to articulate, "I literally feel sick, like I feel sick," and he can't grasp the pencil well enough to make the formations of the letters in a way that you could even read it properly. So it's very sad, but at the same time, it's exciting time to be dyslexic and dysgraphic, because you have now all of these technology and the tools that you have from technology to be able to write whatever, because you talk, it types, you have other, other ways to be able to scribe and retain information, like audiobooks and things like that. Those things that were rejected in traditional learning for a long time, that are now being more accepted. But at the same time, sometimes with traditional learning, they rely on it too much, where then they're not engaging enough with the child. And so you kind of get the best of both worlds when you're homeschooling.
Could you compare and contrast the different options for our listener? Waldorf, Montessori, traditional schooling, magnet schools, homeschooling, unschooling. There are a lot of options out there. So, and for some of our listeners, they're not going to be familiar with even the term Waldorf or Steiner. So, yeah, could we start there?
I'll start with where I began, which was Montessori. Maria Montessori is the one who began the program. And she really has a philosophy that children learn intrinsically. And they really want to learn what is everyday life skills and do it in a fun, playful manner. And also not having a child have to sit still and be forced to learn one subject that maybe they're not ready to learn. They learn at their own pace. So you allow the child to look at the materials, which the materials are always presented beautifully. They are very visually stimulating, and really go from those little skills like even sweeping and tying your shoes, buckling, and then going further into research and learning how to find that research and really guiding them and being the facilitator to learning. Of course, then those traditional aspects, will come in, like the writing and things like that. But all of that is done at the child's pace and level. And Montessori believes in multi-age classrooms because they believe that the little ones can learn from the older ones. And it's a beautiful translation when you see it inside of a classroom. Now, Waldorf sometimes gets confused with Montessori. They have kind of the same philosophy that every child goes at their own pace. And every child needs to learn intrinsically and want to learn and have an enjoyment with learning. But they have a really creative spin where they base it off of fairy tales. And it's very interesting. They basically, instead of instructional books, the children create their own instructional books. Like Montessori, but on a bigger level where they are doing all the art, they are doing all the research. So at the end, they have a complete book of everything that they've learned, and what they haven't learned, both Montessori and Waldorf, roll over into the next year. So in other words, you're not like, oh, you're far behind, you have to like stay back. No, you can roll over and be at the same pace. What is interesting is it all has a creative aspect. Unschooling is kind of how I went with my high school children, because I had to, what I call, de-school them. My daughter was having like panic attacks about tests, and that she had to reach this number of words in her paragraph that she was supposed to do, or her paper that she was supposed to do. And it was just becoming some big stressed out thing. And because they weren't adhering to any of her accommodations, that it just wasn't working. But she had been brainwashed into, this is the only way that I can learn. And so my son as well was like, well, if I don't focus on this and get this at an A level, then I failed and I can't move forward. And that takes all of that pressure away. And unschooling is not about letting your kids sit and watch video games all day. Unschooling isn't taking them out of school and having them participate in no learning at all. It's really giving them the gift of saying, what is your talent? What is it that you want to master? And then you take that gift and that talent, that passion, because you'll find that every child does have one. It's just their light was diminished at some point in time. So you reignite that flame, and then that child can go and say, okay, this is what I'm really into. I'm really into mechanics. And so you can go and you can start now. You're going to get a car. You're going to start working on this car. You're going to rebuild this car. Now we're going to talk about math through this. Now we're going to talk about blueprints or how you build something. You just build from there. And while you're doing that, you're doing life skills as well. So unschooling, it gets a real bad rap because of what the term is, but really it's about learning about what you really are good at and getting better at it so you can make a future with it. So that is really what unschooling is about. And then there's world schooling, which I love, okay? And that's traveling with your kids. And so everybody wants to have, a cultural aspect of different people and how they live their lives. And to do that, it's important not only to look at a book and stare at a picture, or even look online and try to experience it maybe through a video or a movie. Go there, experience it, taste the food, try the food, go to the festivals, make sure that your game plan is to ingratiate yourself in the community, and make sure that you're listening to the language and your children are really enraptured with that. And I was able to do that with my youngest for her first few years before COVID hit. And she traveled Europe. She was very young, and we wondered, Oh boy, is she ever going to even remember any of this stuff, right? And she does. She'll come back. She's so excited about it. She can't wait to travel more. We call her a little world traveler bug. And homeschooling really allows you to do that. And you can do that on so many different levels.
Wow. But what about the legal requirements? Do you get in trouble for not following the traditional framework that the government hands down? Are you having to periodically submit evidence that they're learning a curriculum, or you get put in jail, or your kids get taken away? Like, tell us more about that.
Well, that's an excellent question. I get that a lot. It is legal to homeschool your child in all 50 states. So that is a fact. Now, each state, as you know, the United States has their own certain laws with homeschooling. I live in California. So for me, believe it or not, homeschooling is actually pretty liberal right now. And so you can choose many different directions to go. So if you would like more guidance and you would like what's called a home school teacher, you would choose maybe charter schools. Or if you have a child that has special needs and you're really looking for those specialized services that you can't afford, you would want to go with a charter school. So what a charter school is, it's aligned with the district. Okay. And some have a little bit different flavor from the district. That was the whole point to it. But you will get funds through the district. And the funds actually support the enrichment programs, any kind of IEP needs that you may have. And you will have a support with a homeschool teacher that will come, and usually you meet with them once or twice a month. It could be, online or in person. And basically, they just kind of review things with you. They may speak with your child. And the requirements, from what I remember when I was doing this with my child, was I believe you had to have one sample, which was one page for each course subject that you were doing. You will get tested through a charter school, at least recently. We have been told that, because it wasn't, you could opt out of it at one point in time, but they're starting to get a little bit harder nosed about it, because the districts are kind of unhappy about the charters taking district funds. So we're kind of in a battle right now, and parents are kind of getting a little upset because they're kind of tightening the noose a little bit. But I always tell people that if you'd like to switch over to a PSA, and that's what I do, it's a private school affidavit. And basically, you can also do it just yourself. You can be the school, okay? And you are the teacher and the principal and all of that. A lot of times that's intimidating for parents. Like, what are you talking about? So that's it. So I do this affidavit and I'm stuck. Some parents are pros and they're like, yeah, that sounds like it's perfect for me. But if you want to do a PSA and not be under a district, you can join umbrella schools. And that is a beautiful thing. And basically, an umbrella school ties into your PSA. So, like, I do one with my daughter, and it's a private homeschool umbrella school. I have no district oversight, but they handle the attendance for me. I do the grades and stuff, but they handle all the transcripts. They handle all of that in a professional manner. They have counselors on board for high school, SATs, ACTs. Is it a requirement? No, but they have those services there. They have enrichment like drama, sports, arts. They also have drop-off programs where you can drop your child off several days a week for either a half a day, full day. It depends on the program. And you do pay a minimal fee. For us, it's $68 a month, but I go basic because I don't do all of the extra bells and whistles that they offer, because I choose to do an enrichment center. So I have a whole different thing going on. But I still utilize the attendance and the transcripts, the report cards, because I don't want to deal with not the fact that I'm entering the grades. I just don't want to do all of that, IT things that would come with all of that. There's another way you can do it. You can PSA and then join co-op groups in your neighborhood. And these are mothers that come together. And these mothers come together and they create kind of like a school-like setting. They're bringing their expertise to certain things. So like if somebody's father is into finance, then he's going to do the stock marketing class. So like situations like that. And life skills is huge. So there's a lot of different ways that you can definitely homeschool without having the tremendous oversight. Now, like I said, every state is different. So I'm talking about California. So what you would do if you were worried about that and you wanted to kind of, venture out and find out what homeschooling was all about, you would call someone like me, a homeschool consultant, and then you would get, the information you need in your state to do it legally and properly, because we want to make sure that families are doing it right and that they're not, nervous or scared. And we want parents to take charge of their child's education because it's important, because you're the parent and they're your children. And it's something that we want to take total responsibility for.
Yeah, you mentioned the umbrella school handles the attendance for you. I know there's this term truancy. If a kid is truant, then they can get in big trouble. I don't know what happens to them, but it feels like a big deal.
It can be a
Yes.
big deal. Really and truly, when you're doing an umbrella school, when you homeschool, there are no sick days. There are no real, you're at school, when you're at home. And so that's why they let you determine the attendance that you did with your child. Some people take out all of their, Thanksgiving. Some people take out their Christmas vacations, or something like that. I myself, I even if my kid was sick, even if we had to go somewhere, let's say it was a trip that we had to do maybe for a family funeral or something, we're going to still hit the museums. We're going to still find that time to be able to school our child. So in that aspect, you're not going to really find truancy if you're doing it through a private school affidavit with an umbrella school. That same goes if you're not with an umbrella school as well. And even with a charter school, okay? Because even though they're checking on you, you're still homeschooling. So there is no brick and mortar building that somebody is checking you off and saying, you were 15 minutes late? Well, we banish you for recess. That kind of thing does not happen, thankfully. Now, if you choose to homeschool and not know kind of the rules behind it, and you just kind of drop your kid out of school and you're trying to manage it, that could be a scary situation, especially depending on what state you live in. They can, bang on the door and act like you are truant and, take you to court and carry on with a lot of nonsense. But what you can do if you go PSA is if they knock on the door, because sometimes there's a few times at COVID when parents started really removing the kids from the district here in California. The districts didn't understand homeschooling or the rules to homeschooling, and a lot of these schools fought back by intimidating letters to these parents and stating that, if you go truant, then you could be arrested. You were going to take you to court. Basically, we could take your kids away from you. There is a place that I expect everybody who homeschools, no matter, what religion or what background you have, it's HSLDA, and it is a basic homeschool lawyer base, right? They basically took it to them and said, look at this letter I just got. And they just slammed them down and said they just didn't know the rules. So they appropriately, legally gave these districts the rules of homeschooling. And then they retracted all of the letters and there was a great big apology about that. But they were terrified, and they still are bothered because the children are leaving. And surprisingly, so are the teachers. The teachers are, well, actually not surprisingly, but the teachers are also leaving as well. So there's a great exodus happening right now, and I feel like it's an education revolution that's happening, and parents are really at the head of it. And what's so interesting, though, is teachers and colleagues are finding that homeschooling is actually a great business move as well. And parents are understanding that, hey, we can make this a business move as well with our expertise and what we have to offer other homeschooling families. So you don't have to quit your job, but if you don't have one in general and you want to create an income, you have that ability. There is so much behind this homeschooling movement.
Yeah, that's cool. I heard the term magnet school many times, and I didn't really know what it was. I've heard the term charter school before. Are they different, charter school and magnet school?
Okay, charter schools can also be brick and mortar. They could be a creative arts school. Like a charter school is kind of like trying to go outside the box and do something like, deep in science and math, like a deep science math school or a language immersion school or something like that. What I'm talking about when I reference charter, I'm referencing charter homeschool. So this is another little department of the charters that they've taken is the homeschooling. Magnet schools are again very similar in aspect of it's kind of off the beaten path, but it's still district based in funding and everything. And you're getting a more creative spiel, you're getting a more progressive way of going about learning. You maybe have a Montessori magnet school, you may have a Waldorf magnet school. Those are kind of off the beaten path. Really, when I'm talking about charters, I'm talking about the homeschool charter schools. And then when I'm talking about co-ops and different homeschool schools that are also technically, they say, not magnet, micro schools. So there's what this homeschooling thing is happening right now called micro schools. And basically it's the communities again coming together, maybe finding like, a YMCA or a building that they can rent and come together and really create that learning environment and that learning journey that they're looking for.
Wow. This is so much more complicated than I thought.
It's really interesting because what used to be kind of in the basement, you pictured, a mother, a swinging like light bulb going back and forth. The child doesn't get to go outside. They're peeking outside. They can't see other children. I mean, that's may happen, but that may happen in anybody's home, even if they go to a public school and they're being abused at school and then sent off to a place for, a couple hours a day. This is not what homeschooling is about. What happened during the pandemic was what I call crisis schooling. And the districts had no idea what homeschooling was. So kids were forced to, sit in a chair, stare at a screen, and magically learn. And what happened was we saw that special needs children in particular fell through the cracks. All spectrums of learners were getting depressed and families were frustrated. And they were also finding out, is this what my kid is doing? Because now it was brought into the home via computer and going, this isn't learning from my kid. My kid's half asleep. My kid isn't engaged. My kid doesn't care. And so that actually forced parents to find a new kind of revolutionary way of educating, and they stumbled upon homeschooling. And what they really realized was homeschooling is not what the pandemic was, which was crisis schooling. And they found that, wow, I can enrich my child in such a way that they are excited about their academics, about education, about further learning. That's why they pulled their kids out for homeschooling. And I know that there's some confusion with that. They're like, well, you hated it so much. Why would you rip the kid out to go do it? Because they didn't realize that wasn't homeschooling. That has nothing to do with homeschooling. Sitting in front of a screen all day being lectured to, that's not schooling. And that's not learning.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a moment. There's a thing called Zoom fatigue, and it happens not just to kids, it happens to adults too. If you're in meetings all day long on Zoom, bad for your eyesight. It's bad for your body, for your physical exercising, and that all that sedentary time. It's going to lead to things like perhaps high blood pressure or obesity, etc. What sort of things can our parents do that are listening to ensure that kids that are learning through computers, and whether it's Zoom or some other more gamified platform where they're learning online, that it's actually working and not.
Oh, definitely. Also, that always comes up with homeschooling is that my kid isn't socialized or they're not active or they're not able, to really build their bodies in a healthy way, right? And we need activity and we need socialization. And so, really and truly, I prefer hybrid type of a situation. I know that online learning is terrific. I mean, I love it, but I'm also not somebody that wants to be in front of the screen all day long, and like anybody else. And so, really and truly, when we're talking about different enrichment centers, these centers really act as a community. So, an example would be my daughter takes dance. She's taking kung fu. She takes PE courses. There is a tumbling class. And so you are able to really look at that physical education and socialization and be able to, like I said, a la carte it to your schedule that's personalized, individualized to your child, and make sure that their brain is not just being fried on the computer, that it needs that other outside stimulation and, in person conversation with teachers and other students of their
Mhm.
peers.
Now, you mentioned dance and kung fu and so forth. So it didn't occur to me that a dance studio or some sort of fitness studio or something like that, martial arts studio, would be considered part of a curriculum for homeschooling. But you mentioned it, makes total sense. So when you were talking about enrichment centers at the beginning of this conversation, I was envisioning one of these after school teaching type centers where you drop the kid off and then they're learning whatever other curriculum, but it's all kind of STEM based usually, or it's things that they might get additional tutoring on from things they learned at school. But this is different thing altogether.
Yeah, this is much different. I mean, this is a theater program. This is music lessons. You can take guitar, ukulele, voice lessons. As for me, like I'm an academic based musical teacher at the enrichment center that I'm actually talking about right now. And I do core subjects, but basically what I do is I incorporate an entire full show with costumes and backdrops, and they learn it through music, and then we do hands-on activities as well. So you can incorporate the core. But what's so neat is with enrichment centers, at least the whole, and I know what you're saying because you're thinking after school based enrichment centers that we've had for so long. This is very different. This is a homeschooling enrichment center where you're really trying to be there for the whole child, but also family centered. So it's really around what the parents' needs are for their children as well as what the children need. So it's really remarkable. My daughter is doing Willy Wonka right now. She's very excited. She got starring role for being in third grade. She's a little one. And so she's got a little solo and a dance. And so I mean it's really a world that this new generation, these littles that are coming up, don't really see any difference because this is what they've been doing since the pandemic pretty much. I don't think that they'd like it any other way. These are not traditional kids that want to sit and stare at even a teacher in front of a classroom. They want to be engaged, they want to be moving, they want to collaborate, they want socialization. So that whole misnomer that your child is unsocialized is actually incorrect if you do it properly. I mean, yeah, anybody can be trapped in the house if you choose to be. But if you want, that support, that community,
Mm-hmm.
it's out there.
Awesome. Now, I'm especially curious to hear about the theater angle. If you're teaching, let's say, history or science in a theater type environment, this actually reminds me of a previous guest. I met him at a mastermind, and he gave a presentation that was really phenomenal. His name is Scott Eck. I actually mentioned him to you on a previous call. He has this thing called leadership theater, and he goes into corporations, some of the largest companies in the world, and will teach the executive team things around leadership, team building, innovation, all sorts of things, using stories from the past that he and his team reenact. I'll link to the episode in the show notes, Scott Eck, and this whole thing about leadership theater. I would love to hear how you're doing it so that you're teaching your kids and maybe other kids that are in the cohort that you might have formed these different principles of, let's say entrepreneurship or leadership or what have you in a theater environment?
Well, for me, like an example would be for me if a parent was looking for a government class or a history class. I would do maybe 13 colonies, and it is a academic based comedy, which I love laughter in a classroom because I feel that opens up the brain to learning. And so it's an academic based comedy, and it's a musical as well. So they will learn all about the 13 colonies, the Europeans that came in, about the Native Americans, the formation of our government. George Washington is the narrator of the entire play. And with that, though, which is interesting, is I'll have a multi-age group of kids, which they are all at different paces of learning. And so what's so nice about this, the songs, they translate for all spectrums of learning. So we're done with that. So the songs are now embedded in their brain. And then the act of even using costumes and props, well, that brings the class together. So now they're not worried about Johnny not reading as well as Sam, or Sally has better writing skills than Julie. They're not worried about that. Now they're coming together to bring a production together while learning through the dialogue, the principles of what the core subject is. Then what I have them do is I have them come and do hands-on projects. So they get to pick an outstanding person of that time period. If someone picks Martha Washington, so they will now go and research her, and then they will bring back a creative way of presenting that. And so that goes with each pace of learning. One person may have just like a one-page paper about her and a picture, or another person may go all out and do an interview or something like that, or do a movie about it. So it really aligns all spectrum of learning. And then when they walk away, they have those songs that are embedded, I believe, please believe me, they're embedded in your brain forever and always. Even the adults, even the poor parents are like, it's now always with me. So, I mean, that's a good thing. Okay. I've had high school students call me and go, thank you so much. I had forgotten all about that. It came up on the test. I started those songs, and all of a sudden it came right back. I had all the answers. So that alone is really remarkable. And it works with the whole family unit in the classroom as well as the family at home. And it really kind of transitions into a great academic experience. And so when they roll over to the next topic of maybe 13 colonies, they can all roll over at their pace. So the gifted children can go roll on. The kids that may have had more difficulty can either kind of repeat it or then move forward in a slower pace. And so it isn't that children are picked out because of whatever label that they have been given by the educational establishment. We all just work together and learn.
There's a whole book series of Tuttle Twins.
Yes, I know. I love the Tuttle Twins. Yes, yes.
So over 3 million copies sold, 3.5 million, I think. So they're clients of mine. I'm very familiar with them. And I also read some of their books to my 3-year-old. Some are more for older kids, but it's amazing. And the newest book that just came out is called America's History. It's a huge history book. I remember I was trying to read some of it to little David, and it's a little too old for him right now. But I was reading to him about this story of the Tuttle Twins' neighbor set up a whole obstacle course in the backyard. And it was all based on the shot heard around the world when the Redcoats were trying to capture some of the revolutionaries in Lexington. So it was Lexington and Concord. And it all tied in to the obstacle course. So clever, so clever. And I'm just curious if there's stuff like that out there already in a set of curricula that a parent can just buy and download, and now they don't have to come up with a whole play from scratch.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. I write a lot of my plays. I love to pull from Bad Wolf Press, badwolfpress.com. They are phenomenal. And they have wonderful, catchy songs. Like I said, those songs, they stay forever. And they have wonderful, catchy songs, and it's all based on curriculum. They do life skills, they do history, they do science, they do math, they do language arts. One of my favorites is Alice with Adventures with Idioms. I'm currently actually doing that right now. And basically, the whole show is about Alice and her friends experiencing idioms in Wonderland. And what's so fun about it is the kids actually have to, like, when they say, well, hands down, they have to actually slap their hands down. Now they're really getting a visual of what that literally means and what it really means. And so it's a lot of fun, like raining cats and dogs. They understand it. And that's a hard concept sometimes for young kids to get, because they do take things very literally. And so we're doing that play through Bad Wolf Press currently right now. And basically that rolls into more language arts, and then we go into grammar, and then I utilize a lot of Montessori.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to know if you can, let's say, hypothetically walk into a child's bedroom and see, just based on how the room is set up, that, oh, this is a Waldorf kid, this is a Montessori kid, this is an unschooled kid, etc. Is it that obvious? Like, for example, I know there are quote unquote Montessori beds, and they're very close to
Oh,
the
yeah.
floor, etc. So if the kid
Yeah.
had a Montessori bed, like, oh, there's a Montessori kid. Or with Waldorf, because my daughters who are now grown, I did send them to Waldorf schools when they were young, Waldorf kindergarten. Some of them actually went to Waldorf high school.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. That's
yeah,
cool.
there was a Waldorf high school in Christchurch, New Zealand, where we were living at the time. What they call Steiner schools, because they don't refer to it as Waldorf.
Right. They're Steiner schools. Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Rudolf
Yes.
Steiner, the founder, yeah, of Waldorf.
Right.
So I know with Waldorf schooling, they're big into imagination and not having too
Mm-hmm.
much detail on things like dolls. So they'll have no face on the doll, so that inspires the child to imagine what these things might be. And so I'm curious, what are the tip-offs for you if you were to see a kid's home, that it would be a Waldorf home or a Montessori home, etc.?
Well, for me, like definitely Montessori has specific materials that you utilize. And these are wooden materials. They're very neutral based in color. They invite the child to come and play. They have a very playful like look to them, but yet they are definitely academic in the way they're structured. So each child, when they begin to, pull out, let's say for preschool, they're going to pull out a tray, and there's going to be a jar of beans, there's going to be a couple of cups, then there'll be some water. And so the child is encouraged to do all of the pouring and then separating and sorting. You get a little bit older, you're going to see the checkerboard activity for math skills, and that helps with place value. And it looks like a big checkerboard. Everything is wood, nothing is plastic. Everything is basically neutral, and so bright colors. The colors are basic reds. The primary colors, they stick with the primary colors when it's not a wood neutral base, so I would know instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And you have low shelving. Low shelving, the shelving is there for the child to be able to reach. And so nothing like way up where they'd have to ask. It has to be eye level for them to be able to be enticed and intrinsically wanting to participate with. With a Waldorf, you're going to see, like you said, a lot of imagination. They love fairy tales. Fairy tales are awesome. And I actually am a fairy tale queen. And so that is something that I actually really, really do love. My daughter did a bit of Waldorf when we started with the charter school, the homeschooling charter school. I did for a little bit. And they had a Waldorf program, which I really, really loved. And so you're going to go out and you're going to do things in nature. You're going to go and play with the sticks, and you're going to build a fort, and you're going to really be involved with the energy, the nature around you. And you're really encouraged to look and learn and find and discover. I mean, a lot of that is what that's about. Montessori, like I said, Montessori and Waldorf, they sometimes are interchangeable because they have the same philosophy in the fact that they want the kid to learn and love learning and and intrinsically learn, but they're different in the sense that Montessori is a little more structured in the sense that it's more based on the academic spectrum, where Waldorf, for instance, does not focus on reading until like 8 years old. So there's some big differences that come about with like the reading methodology and things like that. Unschooling really just looks like a house that is lived in, but also might have a child building a computer or building a vehicle or a painting. You might find a room filled with canvases or a clay activity, or your child may be gone all the time because they are in acting classes or they are in dance classes. That looks basically towards the child's gifts, their passions, and what really makes them excited to go further in their learning. And then world schooling looks like a lot of luggage, and a lot of plane tickets, and a lot of like maybe an RV. But it's also about them taking that learning of the experience. And then you would see maybe notebooks of where they've been, see basic things like photography of different aspects of where they were, and then take that photography and have them do a paper about it, have them do a research project about it. So what's so neat is homeschooling and all of these different methods and techniques really can be family centered, and the child can really find that journey of having it personalized and individualized, and so it really looks different for each family, which is exciting to me.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And all this can be augmented to your traditional schooling if you're
Yeah.
sending your kid to public schools, and that's what you're doing, and you're not going to change that. These different
Yeah.
modalities could be in addition, where you add in some enrichment after school. You work in some museum trips over the weekends and things like that with specific goals in mind. And even just like having eye level shelves for your little kids, and the bed down near the ground, so it's not hard for them to climb up it. Those are accessibility
Right.
features that any parent could build into their child's home.
Yeah, and all of those things are about
Yeah.
self-sufficiency and about being training the child to understand that they are capable. And with that capability comes strong self-esteem. And so it's really interesting. And like you said, a lot of times you can find like a Montessori or Waldorf in a public school district, maybe a charter, maybe a magnet. A lot of private schools are out there as well, and that will provide you with a lot of this enrichment as well. That's where I began. I began at a Montessori school that was performing arts based. My children took violin, piano, theater, art, and that's what really did well for them because they were gifted in those things. So then what happened with the academic things, what we had to learn from scratch, just wasn't a big component because they were able to dive deep. So really look around, and sometimes when you say private school, you say think big expense. Sometimes you think homeschool, you think big expense. Not all the time. Yes, you can do it and be expensive about it. And yes, there are wealthy people that throw money and do it that way. But there are other avenues that you can absolutely homeschool and still make money. You can homeschool, still keep your business, and have your child active and enrichment programs and socialize. And so you can have your kid go to a private school and still find different avenues for different grants and things that you can find that would even incorporate with that. And if your kid has a special needs, then you actually have even legal ways to have differentiation with your learning
Yeah.
for your child.
Now, with Steiner or Waldorf, I know that Rudolf Steiner was really into spiritual esotericism, and he formed this whole spiritual movement called Anthroposophy. Is that something that's incorporated into Waldorf? What, do you know anything about that whole movement?
It is incorporated. That part is incorporated if you are at a private
Okay.
school. You're at a private Waldorf school. If you are going through a district, then they do chip away at that. That aspect gets kind of pushed to the side a little bit. That's because of, separation of church and state. Everybody gets uptight about any kind of spirituality at all being mentioned sometimes, especially here in California, maybe in other parts of the country. But I know here, because my child did do it for a year, that aspect it's there, but it's not really talked about in depth, if
Yeah,
that makes
got
any
it.
sense.
I'd love to hear about the life skills aspect of this, because there's things like junior achievement, which when I did it as a kid, as a teenager, I thought it was a joke. Like arts and crafts, how does that relate to
Right.
starting a business and having it be successful? So I dropped out. I thought it
Right.
was completely useless and ridiculous. What sort of life skills are just really stand out for you that kids are learning through homeschooling or through kind of extracurricular environments, enrichment centers, and parents going out of their way to teach stuff versus what they would normally learn in a traditional schooling environment like public schools? And I'm thinking, for example, discernment, not necessarily believing everything the government tells you, understanding that laws aren't necessarily just, they are only legal. Right? And so
Right.
this sort of
Yeah.
stuff you don't learn in school. You don't learn how to start a business. You don't learn about how to balance a checkbook, or maintain a credit history that allows you to buy a home and that sort of stuff. Can you give a few areas that just really stand out for you?
Great. Yes. Well, I'd like to begin basically with my own child, my son. When I decided that it was time to homeschool, he was in high school. And like I said, his self esteem was pretty low, and he was kind of feeling like, why bother? Right. He was at that point where I don't care, that old famous saying. And I told him I did care and that we were going to really figure this out. And I know that he loves theater. He'd been in theater his whole life. And so basically, what we were allowed to do with homeschooling was to have him get a job. So he actually got a job at the Kroc Center, and he was the stage manager backstage, the headphone guy, and he did all of the progress under a really wonderful mentor. And he earned money for it. I mean, it was a job. He was paid. And then with that payment, he had to come home. We had him split up the bills, and he ended up getting accepted into a performing arts college. And so he continued to work and come home. Then he'd come home and do his schoolwork from that point on. So it would become home. He'd leave for work, and then he would come home and do his schoolwork. He walked out with work experience. He was able to join the union right afterwards. Then that took him on different rock shows and things like that. He got into his college. He was able to pay for his room and board. He was able to pay for all of the extra expenses and really get an understanding of money. And so not only did it, self-esteem rise and his confidence, he felt like he could handle his business. He could handle the world. And a lot of that came with when the paycheck came, of course, the money came, and then that's math and learning savings and what that's all about. Really, that rolled over to my daughter. She really took on the whole money aspect of it. And she is 24 years old, and she's 2 years out of college right now, and she lives in Wisconsin, so she's far away from us, and she's an independent, educated woman, really involved with her art. Both kids really benefited from life skills, meaning how to survive in this world, doing something that you love, not just getting a job and sludging along and being miserable through it. Recently, a student of mine who I was an academic-based manager for, she just recently graduated last year. I focused on life skills with her because she has special needs. And so the academic level where she was at was below normal, but that wasn't the necessary part of her life. The necessary part of her life is what can she get done and how can she do it well. And we discovered that she works really well with little children. So I got her heavily involved at the enrichment center that we go to, into volunteering in the classroom, volunteering on the playground, navigating that, understanding different age groups, and she really clicked with it. And from that point on, she graduated, had a full graduation. It was just beautiful. And now she is actually working at the enrichment center that she did all the volunteering at because the director was so impressed with her. And now she is working with that enrichment center, getting a paycheck, paying her bills, and moving forward in a very positive light. So it's really about telling your children that yes, these things that we're learning in the books are very, very important, and we need to know them. Knowledge is important, but my philosophy is you never stop learning. If you stop learning, you're dead, as far as I'm concerned. But to find those ways to be able to let your child be confident, know that they can make a living, know that they can live on their own and be a prosperous, but yet a good person in the community is what life skills really promotes. And you can do it so well with homeschooling.
And one thing you mentioned earlier in the conversation was around testing. And just because somebody can't test very well, like let's say they have special needs and makes it hard for them to sit there and take a test, and yet they're very smart, gifted, able to understand and integrate complex learnings. One thing I learned from Janet Doman, I interviewed her for this podcast. She's the co-founder of Institutes for Advancement of Human Potential, IAHP. She and her father, Glenn Doman, wrote all these books about how to teach your baby how to read, how to teach your baby math, etc. Really cutting edge stuff. And one thing she told me that really stuck, really stood out for me was don't test your babies. Saying, well, what was that? What did you learn about that, or whatever? It makes it not fun anymore. There's no benefit for them. The benefit's only for you, like to give you a pat on the back that you're conveying the information and they're receiving. Just trust that they're receiving the information and they're integrating what they're supposed to be integrating.
That's brilliant. That's like my whole philosophy on everything, because everything will come. It'll all come. If it's meant to come, it'll come. What you need to focus on is what the child is really good at and what they love. And it does what they love. Can they make a future out of it? And 9 chances out of 10, the answer is yes. I mean, it's a yes. And no, it's going to be a no for, the very short kid that wants to be an NBA, a basketball player. I mean, that's, realistic passions, realistic goals and gifts. And another person who I think you would be really great to maybe even interview is Bijel Palmer. He is a part of a company called Funnancial.com. Fun, F-U-N, in great big letters, and then Nancial.com. He has an amazing program for kids 7 all the way up through adulthood about financial responsibility and what that looks like. And his classes are amazing. And they have a really interesting platform on how they introduce that to families. And he's someone I work very closely with, and I highly recommend anybody looking into that, especially because math is very important, in life, and to find out how to manage your money and also how to create your own wealth and to learn how to save and entrepreneurship. That really surrounds his program, and he's great. So.
And any other resources you want to recommend while we're at it in terms of curriculum, books that are fun to read, like Tuttle Twins, we're both fans of. I also mentioned on a
I love Tuttle Twins.
It's amazing, right? What should Danny do? I told you about that on a previous call. Is great set of books. That's all about the power to choose. And it's kind of like choose your own adventure and see what the consequences.
I love that. You did. You told me that. That's
so
a good one.
Any other books or tutoring programs or anything like that you want to recommend as tools for our listeners' tool set?
Well, again, I love Funnancial.com. I love AdWolfPress.com. I really like Outschool.com. Now, Outschool.com is a company that is solely online. What's so neat about it is, again, you can pick and choose the classes that you want your child to take. and you can pick and choose the teacher that your child has. So a lot of these teachers are credentially teachers. They're credentialed teachers, so they know what they're talking about for geometry and those high maths and different sciences and things like that. So I highly recommend them as
Okay.
well.
And you said financial. It seems like it's financialfreedom.com. Yeah.
There you go. There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
There you go.
I
Thank you.
was just Googling
Yes.
that. So, okay.
Yes. And it's Bijel, right? Bijel
Yeah.
Palmer, right? And then Shivani, his daughter Shivani, is also involved.
Got it.
It's a
Yeah.
very fun program.
Awesome. Cool. And so if our listener or viewer wants to contact you, work with you on helping develop their own child's curriculum and learning plans and all that sort of stuff, I know you do consulting or coaching in that area. So how do they work in?
People can reach me at maryresenbeck.com. That's my website. They can also buy my book and download my book there, Take Charge of Your Child's Education. You can also find my book on Amazon. You can also reach out to me on Facebook. Again, just look up Mary Resenbeck, and I'm the only one there, so you can find me there. I also, if you look me up on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram. So all those areas that you can come and find me. I started a TikTok, but I just haven't gotten to TikToking yet. So
Okay, well, thank you so much, Mary. This was fabulous, and wow, you are a wealth of information and wisdom around teaching and inspiring kids. So thank you so much.
thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
Yeah. All right, and listener, get out there and make it a great week. Make it a great week for your kids or some kids that you happen to know and want to inspire. And we'll catch you on the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.